Welcome to the Joseph Goldstein Insight Hour. This podcast is an expression of our shared interest in self-discovery. Join Joseph as he shares his deep knowledge of the path of mindfulness. If you are interested in supporting this podcast, please go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/Joseph.
Tonight, I'd like to continue with the investigation of the Satipatthāna Sutta using Venerable Analayo's book, Satipatthāna, The Direct Path to Realization, as the basic framework just for exploring both the structure and the range of meanings found in the sutta. We talked last week about the basic definition of Satipatthāna, that is, the four abidings of mindfulness, and the particular mental qualities which the Buddha repeated several times as being necessary for this path of awakening, necessary for liberation. The refrain was, a bhikkhu abides ardent, clearly knowing, and mindful, free from desires and discontents with regard to the world. So we discussed what it means to practice with ardor and with clear comprehension. This evening, continue with the exploration of the third quality the Buddha mentioned, and one which in some way is central to this entire sutta. Bhikkhu abides ardent, clearly knowing, and mindful. Mindfulness. This is the English translation of the Pali word sati. And it really has a central place in every Buddhist tradition. It's mindfulness, or sati, which makes any spiritual undertaking possible. I'd like to read, call it an ode to mindfulness. This was, in the Tibetan tradition, often people, or the great lamas, there are spontaneous Dharma songs which just arise in their minds. So this was a spontaneous Dharma song to mindfulness by Nyoshul Khen Rinpoche, one of the great Dzogchen masters. He said, "Mindfulness is the root of Dharma. Mindfulness is the body of practice. Mindfulness is the fortress of the mind. Mindfulness is the aid to the wisdom of innate wakefulness. Lack of mindfulness will allow the negative forces to overcome you. Without mindfulness, you will be swept away by laziness. Lack of mindfulness is the creator of evil deeds. Without mindfulness and presence of mind, nothing can be accomplished. Without mindfulness, you are a heartless zombie, a walking corpse. Dear Dharma friends, please be mindful. By the aspiration of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may all Dharma friends attain stable mindfulness and ascend the throne of perfect awakening." I think that sums up the import of this quality of mind. Sati has several meanings. And several functions, all of which are a key to the growth of wisdom. On one level, the word in Pali means remembering. It has to do with memory. And it refers particularly to the remembering of certain recollections, certain wholesome recollections. And these are reflections on the Buddha, on the Dharma, on the Sangha, on one's own ethical conduct and generosity, recollecting the devas, and one's own past lives. These are the wholesome recollections that sati, or mindfulness, can help us with. So although we may not be able to recollect our own past lives, perhaps, maybe some of you can, but the other reflections can really serve a very useful purpose and a help for us in this long path of awakening. Because when we reflect on the Buddha, on the Dharma, on the Sangha, it arouses in us, or can arouse in us, a strengthening quality of faith, because it enlarges the context of our own particular struggles, the many ups and downs of our practice. And we remember that the efforts that we make in our practice are part of a much larger journey. We can get so caught, in the midst of struggle with discomfort in the body or difficulties in the mind, and we forget that it's part of a much larger process. Sarah talked a few weeks ago about the life of the Buddha, and she was reading a lot from the different texts. She spoke of how the Bodhisattva overcame the armies of Mara, forces like greed, and desire, and aversion, and restlessness, and conceit, and a number of others. When I was listening to that talk, and particularly that part of the Bodhisattva overcoming the armies of Mara, it brought home to me the vision and the understanding, the remembrance, that the Bodhisattva's struggle was no different than our own. We are engaged in exactly the same process. So what does it mean to overcome these very, very powerful forces of seduction, the habits of seduction that keep us narrow-minded and closed-hearted? This is what we're engaged in. We're really engaged in this most noble endeavor of purifying the heart, of purifying the mind. And it's a path that the Buddha discovered and many other beings over the years have accomplished. So when we reflect on the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it connects us to that long lineage of people who have actually, and this is a phrase that occurs many times in the suttas, and it always arouses a tremendous joy in me when I contemplate it. It reminds us of all of these many people over the years who have done what had to be done. That's like the song of enlightenment, as nuns and monks and people completed the journey. Done is what had to be done. And I think, what a glorious moment that will be, when we can all proclaim that. So in reflecting, in the use of mindfulness in this way, this reflection on the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it reminds us that this is possible for us also. Many people have walked this path, as we're doing now. There are also the reflections on our ethical conduct. And this is not something we probably usually do very often. But if we take the time to actually acknowledge our commitment to sila, because we have all undertaken that in a very profound and substantial way, it strengthens our self-confidence, it strengthens our self-respect. It's that understanding that, yes, I can train the mind. I can guard my actions. This is something I can do and am doing. course, this reflection on our sila, on our ethical conduct, sometimes gets mixed up with our very Western habit of self-judgment. There was one time when I was practicing in Burma with Sayadaw U Pandita, and I'd been going through a dry spell in my practice where for several weeks I was going in and it was just the same thing day after day after day. I was kind of trying to push it all along. Nothing much was happening. Nothing was changing that I could see very clearly. And so Sayadaw, in one interview, he said to me, Joseph, you should contemplate your sila. And he was suggesting that as a way of arousing energy and some joy. But the first thought in my mind was, when he said, contemplate your sila, what did I do wrong? It's like that was the first impulse of my mind. So we need to get past that kind of habit of self-judgment and realize that it is a powerful reflection. And even when there are lapses, because there are lapses in sila, major or minor for all of us, it's our willingness to see the lapses and then to reconnect with our commitment that keeps our practice moving forward. And the Buddha talked of this. We read of it often in the suttas, when people would come and acknowledge a wrongdoing, a wrong action. So this is the Buddha's words. It is growth in the noble one's discipline when one sees one's transgression as such and makes amends in accordance with the Dharma by undertaking restraint for the future. So it's a very liberal understanding, of our training in morality. It's acknowledging that we can make this commitment. It gives a tremendous strength to us. There may well be lapses, and if we see it and understand, and let that wisdom be the cause for restraint in the future, our journey, our practice, our development keeps unfolding. So it's reflections on the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. It's reflections on one's commitment to sila. The Buddha also spoke of sati as being the recollection of one's liberality, of one's generosity, and if we're so inclined, on devas, the heavenly beings. Because when we do this, when we reflect on the generosity, it brings a very real quality of joy to us and lightness to us. It said the Buddha often began his discourses talking about generosity and how that leads to rebirth in the heavenly realms, leads to the happiness of that, as a way of delighting people's minds. And then when his listeners' minds were open and soft and receptive, he'd hit them with the Four Noble Truths. But we need to prepare the mind to receive the deeper insights. I remember early on in my practice when I was in India in Bodh Gaya with Munindraji, he used to give these long raps about the Deva realms. And I loved it. He would just be talking about these beings with bodies of light and, the heavenly musicians and the pleasure groves. And then he'd talk about Maitreya, the coming Buddha who's in Tusita heaven, giving Dharma talks. And it really did delight my mind. I would just be listening and be filled with a kind of lightness and joy. Of course, there were some skeptics, especially among the Westerners, who are listening. So he would always add at the end of this rap, he would say, you don't have to believe this. It's true, but you don't have to believe it. So in times of low energy, as you're going day after day in your practice, there are times when there's low energy, there's times when there's discouragement. This application of mindfulness, of all of these different wise recollections, can be extremely helpful to us, because we reconnect with something bigger than ourselves. Okay, another meaning of sati, not just kind of this remembering or the practice of these recollections, but one meaning that's really more continuously applied in our meditation practice and in our lives, is sati as presence of mind, or present moment awareness. It's the quality of wakefulness, of being awake in each moment. And it's really the opposite of absent-mindedness, when we're lost, when we don't know what's going on. Sati, or mindfulness in this regard, is that quality of non-interfering awareness, of bare attention. And in this quality, this evenness of mind, there's not the avoidance of anything, there's not the suppression of anything, there's not the reaction to what's arising. It's simply that openness of mind, the attentiveness of mind, the presence of mind. And it's this quality of a detached receptivity that allows for intuitive wisdom to arise. Now, in this openness, we can begin to see all of our experience, in a phrase that Munindraji used countless times, and which just has embedded in my consciousness and was a big help to me as I would be sitting. It's this quality of bare attention, of open awareness, that allows us to see all experience as empty phenomena rolling on. That's all that's happening. Moment after moment, it's empty phenomena rolling on. Even aside from our meditative practice, this quality of bare attention is something we are all familiar with, I think, in a very mundane way. And that is the experience we have when we're listening to music. Just picture settling back, listening to your favorite music. The mind is open, it's attentive, it's not trying to control anything, not trying to control what comes next. It's not reflecting on the notes that have just passed. We're just there, moment to moment, in the unfolding. And often I think the term listening is a very good description for this quality of bare attention. Now, I think most of you have heard that remark by Mother Teresa, which I like so much. You know, when somebody asked her what she says when she prays to God, she said she doesn't say anything, she just listens. And they asked her what God says to her while she's listening. And she replied, He doesn't say anything, He just listens. And went on, if you don't understand it, I can't explain it to you. And it's that sense of just the whole of the Dharma being revealed in this place of listening, of receptive awareness, of open awareness, when we're not trying to control things or make things happen, but we're letting things be revealed. This quality, this mental factor of sati, of mindfulness, of listening, has tremendous power. And there are a long list of its benefits. One of the benefits of sati is that it functions as a guardian of the sense doors. That is, it restrains the mind from papancha. You know, papancha is the Pali word for just proliferating tendency of mind, which we see so often. So guardian of the sense doors here doesn't mean that we close the senses down. That's not the point. But rather that we are mindful of what it is that's arising. And the purpose of this guardianship of the sense doors is to avoid the proliferation of desires, of wanting, of discontent. We really abide more peacefully. A place that I found this exceedingly helpful and very obvious to see the fruits of is in seeing. We don't generally talk much in the meditation instruction about practicing mindfulness of seeing, and yet the visual field is a predominant part of our experience. And so I think it's a very useful place to begin to practice mindfulness and practice this guardianship of the sense doors. I had a very striking experience of this. The times when I've gone down to New York to teach, and being in Midtown, and the visual input is so strong.